Welcome to the BroJ Podcast. Damn it. I'm your OJ.
I'm your bro,
Mm-hmm.
also known as Brandon.
Brandon.
Broden? It's close enough. It kind of works.
Today we'll be talking about we'll be podcasting
We'll be doing the thing.
into your ears. And
Enjoy.
you'll hear it.
This is not an ASMR podcast, but it could become one if you like it enough.
Oh, I forgot. I gotta do the Pokemon trick.
The talking very quietly and soothingly.
Hi. Welcome to the BroJ Podcast. What we're gonna do today, we have a segment. It's called Fake News.
Uh-huh.
We have a list of... No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work if you're just,
Well, I was trying to decide, do I just lean into like the really low, soft voice? Because I can't do whatever you're doing.
Just imagine that whoever's listening is asleep.
Just imagine.
Okay, so we've got a list of fake news articles here.
Mm-hmm.
And we can pick one. We should agree on one and try to flesh it out.
Historic peace accord signed, ending decades-long conflict in the Middle East. Major leap in AI. Computer passes Turing test with unprecedented results.
I'm slightly interested in that one.
That would be kind of cool. Global initiative launched to plant 1 trillion trees, combat climate change. It kind of happened with like the million trees thing with, I can't remember who did that.
Yeah, it's happened. It's been done.
Deep sea exploration uncovers lost city thought to be the mythical Atlantis.
Ooh, that's happened lots. They keep doing that.
They keep finding Atlantis all over the place.
All right, what about the Turing test?
Should we talk about Turing test in a major
leap in
AI?
Because I've heard the phrase, and like, I think I might know, but I don't know like exactly what the Turing test is. Do you know?
It's been a while since I've read about it, but essentially it's a test to see if the AI can think for itself, like come up with its own ideas and kind of think for itself. And I think I can't remember whether it has an emotion part of it. But essentially it's trying to prove that it's not just going off of a list of responses, that it's actually like forming thoughts to come up with an answer to your question.
Yeah,
which is really kind of vague.
ChatGPT is really struggling to write an answer of what the Turing test even is.
I can't remember whether it's imagination. Well, let's see here.
The Turing test, proposed by the British mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing in 1950, is a method of inquiry in artificial intelligence for determining whether or not a computer is capable of thinking like a human being. The test is named after Turing, who was one of the first to question, can machines think? Okay, here's how it works. Human interrogator. Oh, the human. A human judge. Wait, what? Okay, a human judge engages in a natural language conversation with one human and one machine, both of which try to appear human. Oh, so there's a judge and then a human and then a robot. The conversation is typically conducted through a computer, so the judge doesn't know which respondent is human and which is machine. The evaluation. The test's criterion of success is whether the machine's responses are indistinguishable from that of a human. If the judge cannot consistently tell which participant is the machine and which is the human, the machine is said to have passed the test. So there aren't specific laid out questions, at least.
I thought there was, but I guess not. Because a lot of Um,
Hmm.
yeah, some of it is like trying to trick it into knowing. Sorry, I had to move a screen. Um, I think like some of them like try to trick it into like talking about like emotions and um like visualizing different like imaginary realms
Oh.
and concepts and trying to like get the AI to like describe it in a specific way in responses. And yeah, apparently a lot of them have a lot of trouble with doing stuff like that. I think is where a lot of them get hung up on.
And the more I
Hmm.
learn about like our current development of AI, the more I realize we really haven't done that much with it. Like it's crazy
Fair.
what people are surprised by. The fact that this thing just pulled a response out of the entire internet is what it did. It's just a really sophisticated search for what humans have reposited onto the internet.
Mhm. It's just a web scraper.
Yeah, yeah. And
To a certain point, it's basically just a fancy web scraper that's
what
just
one of the
better at
things I've
finding
always wanted to
information.
do is like create like a virtual like create a place where it can essentially think like a CAD model, like program CAD essentially. Not CAD,
Okay.
more like Blender, where
Okay.
it can develop objects, like it can theorize, like it can build a skeleton of you and build a skeleton of me in its mind. It doesn't have to be like all fleshed out. And like
Hmm.
imagine what would happen if you hit me, right? So if we say, who do you think would win in a fight between me and Brandon? It instantly just, spins up a thing where it has two six figures or whatever, and you swing, and like
Hmm.
a place where it can have an imagination. I think that's the most critical part of intelligence is the imagination, and you have to build an environment where it can execute things it imagines. And without that, we won't even
Yeah.
ever come close to something that can think for itself.
Yeah. It's a weird concept to get them to think for themselves and do imagination. Like I do think it does kind of need that space to think, but
It needs
I
the
don't know.
space because I mean that's how humans are. Like even as babies, like
Hmm.
the way we learn is through our imaginations. We like you don't know if something's hot. Like when someone tells you don't touch the stove, right? It's hot.
Yeah.
You see in your mind yourself touching the stove and burning yourself. Like that's how you know like it's part of the learning process. Like if you can't do that, you haven't learned anything. Like those
Yeah.
words end up being empty. So like you sort of have to have a space in your head to think about things in order to be intelligent. Whereas most of the AI, it's just purely responsive. It's like whatever generates, it's just the response. And like there's very little space for it to consider multiple.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always think back to the fact that as humans growing up, it takes us a long time to accumulate the amount of like background knowledge about just the environment around us and the amount of data that is that just kind of becomes intuitive over time
Yeah.
and how it takes information from being like a major event that's something in the forefront of your mind to just like a common back end automatic response, like being burned by a stove. Like as a kid, you touched the stove, you were burned. It was a big event at that moment. And eventually it just turns into this like, yeah, you just don't touch hot things. Stupid. Come on. and
Right.
my and my favorite moments where I like I guess I appreciate that better is there was a AI video of essentially they were attaching an AI to like a little race car in the game that was just going around a track and
Mm.
it could see in front of it, behind it, and to the sides, and could see where the edge of the track was. And its goal was to just, go around and hit these like bars along the track as its reward. So if it got to a bar, it was given a cookie, so to speak. And if it went out of the track, its hand was slapped. And it was really interesting because the guy started talking about it of like at the beginning it's just like wiggling back and forth, just like testing buttons because it
Mm.
doesn't know any of these things and it should be simple to just like follow the track because we have all this previous knowledge. And then it was cool to see it eventually figure out how to move forward and not hit the wall. And then it freak out again as soon as it had to do just an ever so slight right turn and try to go around a corner. And it's just, I think a lot of people, when they think about why AI isn't as advanced or why it's not doing as well as I think some people expect it to be, and like with all the technology we have, I think the
Right.
training of the AI is the most difficult part, and the part that we haven't figured out how to do well in a short amount of time,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it takes a long time.
because there's just so much data. And like, how do you properly present that data? How do you get that data to where it doesn't become skewed in some weird way? And it's just that part kind of, I think, will be the next big advancement into possibly getting closer to passing the Turing test, but also just making AI better. Is like, I think there needs to be some kind of breakthrough in the training process for just AI in general.
I think that this company's onto something. I bought um this thing called the Rabbit
Okay.
R1. They just announced it like a few days ago. But what it is it's a device. Um, it goes in your hand. It has a touch screen and it has a camera and a microphone on it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so it's got like vision AI and some other things built into it to all work together. Device you carry around and you talk into it and ask it questions, and like the camera can see your environment and you can ask a question about like what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples is the guy opens his fridge and he points the camera to his fridge. It shows like just a bunch of things like meat and some vegetables and eggs and whatever. It says,
Mm-hmm.
"Give me a recipe of what I can make from what's in my fridge." And it looks, it
Okay.
examines everything, and it spits out a recipe, explains how to make what it was, some sort of omelet.
Yeah.
I ordered one of those.
Oh, there
So
you go.
what I think is going to happen, and this is something I've been wanting to do, is create like if I had like a camera or some sort of AI I could carry around with me, so you're constantly always training it. And like you'd be like, hey, what is this? Like you do with babies,
Mm-hmm.
you know? What is
Mm-hmm.
that? What is this? You're always quizzing them. Um, I think what they're doing secretly is it is connected to they have a like a network set up where it gets all the responses. They're
Mm-hmm.
having all these people with them training their own little bot, and it's all going to work together
Uh-huh.
to quickly train whatever they have in the whatever their model
Yeah.
is. I think that's going to be a big thing. Is
Yeah, it would
have
almost have to be that.
it would have to be everyone having access and every human on the world training like a baby AI
Mm-hmm.
in order to get it to advance quick enough.
Yeah,
It'll
essentially
ship out in
watching
like
around like a little
April.
pet that you just explain the world to as you're going around doing your everyday things.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that could be really big because that's essentially. Well, and never mind. That's not what they're doing with like GPT or anything like that because they're not saving
They
responses
aren't.
from people. But
Right.
it'd be kind of a similar thing like that where you just kind of almost release it to the world and let everybody like have it be like a, almost be at a loss and have it be like a really low buy-in for everybody.
It's
So it's
so
like
cheap.
super
This thing
accessible.
was only $200. Once it got to the end of it, I'm like, okay, they're onto something here.
Hmm.
The last point of this presentation is it has to be so cheap that anyone watching this video just goes, "Oh yeah, I'll buy that right now." And it was also
Yeah,
only $200. I'm like, yeah, okay,
that's close. I think it would still have to be cheaper than that, if I'm being
yeah,
honest.
yeah. I don't know if a lot of people got a lot of buy-in, but like anyone who's actually interested in AI, like I am,
Hmm.
probably is like, okay, sure.
Yeah, $200 for a big piece of technology. Yeah.
But yeah, it would have to be cheaper to go out to more general populace.
Hmm. Yeah. And then it would have to. I mean, you could kind of do that because most of the processing for something like that, where that's actually learning, is not happening on the device itself. The device
Right.
itself is just basically a transmitter of information between its home server and your device.
Yeah. It looks like it has to be connected to the internet.
Hmm.
most of the time. It's connected to they have a portal, they called it the rabbit hole. And you could like log into it, and then you can set up like little training things for it. So you could be like, and you have to put it on your computer and it like records your screen, and you can record some sort of action like this is how I uh, interact with Discord to generate an image using Midjourney. You know, go
Mm-hmm.
here, use this keyword or whatever, and you could train it, and then you could have it say, hey rabbit, generate an image from Midjourney, and then it just does it. It
Oh.
learns, so you can train it for specific tasks like that.
Mm-hmm. That would be cool.
That'd be super sick. So, and I'm wondering what kind of apps that implements with. Uh,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how it interacted with apps, whether it's all like visual boxing trying to mimic using a mouse and keyboard, or if
right.
it's trying to go about it in some other way.
Like using some sort of API or
Yeah,
something, but
it'd almost
the way
have
they
to
made
be
it
like a mouse
sound
keyboard.
was like that it tries its best to interact with apps like a human would interact with an app, not with any sort. So the apps
Yeah.
don't need an API or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they were kind of secret about part of that. I imagine they don't want a lot of people knowing how that part works. But once I get it, I'm gonna test the crap out of it, see what it can do.
Yeah, it would have to be some kind of like mouse keyboard interaction.
Because I want to get it to use Visual Studio and
Oh, okay, yeah,
start writing code for me and testing code. Right, teach it
yeah.
how to execute its own script that it just wrote,
Mm-hmm.
and see how far we could go that way.
Yeah.
Because there's some practical things that I'd like it to do. Because our website that I work on, right, I do QA. I could do like a web scraping thing. I need to find all the elements on the page and create these things called page objects and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or I really want to try to convince an AI to do it for me. I
Yeah.
wonder if I could get it to go through and be like, hey, and write this all up in um just in a text document in Visual Studio for me. Or not Visual, yeah. I keep calling it Visual Studio. It's VS Code. You know,
Visual Studio
yeah.
Code.
But whenever I say Visual Studio, my mind always goes back to Visual Basic. I'm like, no, it's not Visual Basic.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
I'm just always terrified someone's gonna make that connection. Like Visual Basic? No, not Visual Basic. That is
I think you're safe from that connection happening. I think it's separate enough from Visual Basic that you're just fine.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like because there's a lot of like action trackers out there that will like mimic what you're doing on your screen. But the problem with those that I think that kind of AI would be really useful for is those go by like pixel, like where your mouse is by pixel on your screen. So if like
Yeah.
the window is suddenly slightly missized or you've like slightly moved an icon by like a pixel, it it suddenly can't do its job anymore. And so like going
Right.
through like a testing suite on an application, like I think of a couple jobs ago, I worked at on a big piece of software, and for every release, we'd have to do big smoke tests, is what we call them.
Hmm.
Um, and essentially, we would all just have like a testing sheet of like steps to reproduce that we'd have to just go through in the application, and like we'd have to make ourselves a user and go in and do all these things because there was just no way to automate them in the code behind the back end. You just had to interact with the app to run this test,
Right.
and like having something that could where you could essentially take each of those codes, train the AI
Yes.
how to do it, and have it be a little bit smart of like, oh, the thing's just off to the left a little bit. Okay,
Hmm.
click this, or like have like just like basic toddler level problem solving even to like
Hmm.
help it get through the test to where you'd have a lot less false positives, you know? I think could be like huge in just like the software testing world.
That's
I think
what their demonstration sort of was alluding to. That it would just try to learn pages or pieces or elements
Mm-hmm.
of an application, and not just do like the coordinate clicking for the
Yeah,
thing, but like
that
actually learn what it looks like and how to interact with an
that would
app.
be really cool.
Yeah, that's what
I
it
mean, that's
claims to do.
it's kind of a scary concept because that's could be both like a double-edged sword of like causing a lot of problems. But as is everything though, unfortunately, in this world.
Yeah, and that's
But
the
it's
I think that's the thing where people get scared of AI, because a lot of
hmm
people I've heard a lot of different viewpoints on it, and some are like it's going to take over the world and this and that. But I think the real scary thing is that the most honest answer I've ever heard about that is that it's a very powerful tool. So for anyone to be able to use. So if you get some really bad people out there, they'll have access to a very powerful tool and they can do very malicious things with it. So that's really the scary part. It's not the AI
yeah.
itself doing something like creating a human zoo. It's the
No, it's
people.
it's bad people get a hold of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's the actual sort of terrifying part.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's the only real terrifying part of it that I could actually see. Like I don't think it's gonna become sentient and take over the world. It's not gonna become Skynet. But yeah, it is just but it's funny that because you bring up the point of like slowly taking over and there's like also the point of like um taking over positions and jobs. Jobs is always like a really big one I hear about all the time. It's gonna take over our jobs and we're not gonna have our job anymore. And then I heard a point that someone I wish I could remember who I heard it from, but someone said, "Well, the calculator was invented, and there's still mathematicians, and you still need mathematicians. The calculator is great, and everyone has one now, but
Right. It's
you
just a
still need
tool for
people
the
who are really good
mathematicians.
at math. It just
It's,
made the mathematicians better."
yeah, exactly.
Like I've heard of the programmer one. Oh, we're going to replace programmers, and programmers aren't going to be needed. It's like, a
No.
you need programmers to program it, but at the most, it's just going to become like a calculator for mathematicians where programmers might utilize it to just make themselves better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've
It's
seen
not,
that at my job too. Like
yeah.
it was a few months ago where they finally decided to sign everyone up at all the GitHub accounts for Copilot. And just everyone's using Copilot now at my job. And it just makes everything so much more efficient.
hmm
And yeah, for those who don't know what Copilot is, it's like an AI integration into like your coding, and it's just like gives suggestions of what you might want to code next. And so like you could just hit tab 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 and like it just starts
hmm
entering lines for you.
It's a fancy IntelliSense,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm. Yeah, at the most, I see it changing what jobs exist at a place, which I think would still kind of freak people out. But I think I don't think it's going to be as catastrophic or could be as catastrophic as some people like to boost it up to be.
Right. Like I could see very easily like all the right pieces of an AI completely replacing the QA side of things. Like my entire job probably could be replaced by an AI, which is
hmm
but that doesn't scare me. I want that. I want an AI to be able to do my job for me because guess what? You still need somebody to run it and knows how it's working. And so it what it does is just
Yeah,
evolves my job into the as the QA guy
is the
into
AI
the
trainer, so to
AI
speak.
trainer for our QA. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really all it does.
yeah. It doesn't take your job; it just changes your job, which some people just can't adjust to,
Yeah, I don't think they
unfortunately.
can
But
understand that. Yeah.
like I see another big one is warehouse workers with robots.
Mm,
It's a little bit different. I mean, it still kind of involves AI because the robots need AI to be able to do their dynamic operations. But I think it was I don't know if it was an Amazon warehouse, but
Amazon uses them.
well, they use a certain one, but there was like a really big one where it was essentially the robots were um it was at a delivery facility, um, almost kind of like USPS, but the robots were like literally unloading the trucks and like putting them onto the different conveyor belts and shifting around. Amazon has the robots that will like go into the warehouse to like the shelves and pick up everything
They
and
do
bring
the
it to
pickers.
workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one was doing like this one was showcasing like the unloading potential off of like trucks and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
And their big boast is like we have with this implementation, we basically have the same amount of workers working here. No one got fired. We were just able to handle more trucks at once, and some of their duties got changed a little bit. So rather than being the ones that are like physically moving off the truck, they're the ones that are like because it like required all this gating. So you had like the truck bay door off to the side, and like the truck pulls up to it. Then
Mm.
on this side, you have like the pickers going or the unloaders going into the truck and unloading, and there's all these gates that would have to come up to the side to prevent a human going in and like getting in the way of the robot and stuff like
Oh
that.
sure.
And so the worker just switched from having to go into the truck and unload packages to like making sure the truck was lined up properly, securing the gate, going over, like locking things in, and then hitting the go button and observing and keeping an eye on the robot, so to speak. But he could do it for like 3 different bays at once.
Yeah. And
And
like
so
every single like busy season, like the holiday season comes around, and they are just desperate for workers.
swamped with
Yeah. They
work
can't
that they
hire
can't
enough
handle.
people. There aren't enough people to go and work there for them.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not replacing in a lot of instances you're not replacing workers, you're just filling spots where they didn't have anyone there to work for them.
Yeah. So rather than making the person work overtime
Yeah.
during a season when they should be like having fun with like family and friends and like enjoying themselves a little bit, rather than
Yeah.
overworking those people to death during those seasons, just just go over to the AI closet, pull out the spare bots, charge them
Yeah.
up and let them go.
Charge them up.
It's essentially what you're doing just to like fulfill that extra demand. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a similar thing, and I could see that same kind of concept translating over to just like pure AI instead of just robots.
Yeah. I guess a part that could be concerning for people like that is that in jobs like that where the loader and the driver didn't necessarily have to know anything about computers, now probably need to start learning technology to do their job. Like
Yeah, probably a little
they're
bit.
gonna have to know how to interface with those things better.
A little
Until
bit, but at the same point, at the same time, it opens up a position of just having a tech on hand that whenever that worker runs into a problem, they just call the tech over and the tech does the technical part. They just have to be, I guess there, no matter what, there's a little bit of training of like, here's interact with a piece of technology to turn it on or stuff
yeah.
like that. But some of the way more technical stuff that would be like a really high skill level kind of like gate for some people, I think you could just replace with adding a job of just a tech guy on site,
That guy.
essentially.
Yeah. That
But
makes sense too. Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree. All right. So we aren't really that close to having something passing a true Turing test, I don't think. Because there's been plenty of times where I've interacted with like a chat bot and other things where like all it takes is like one or two questions in, even chat GPT. Like I've tried to having like human interaction type conversations with it. Within one or two responses, it's like you've completely missed the context. You don't even know what we're
Mhm.
going on about here. And so I feel like we're super far away from that still.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while. I think a lot of them, I think, actually, now that I think about it, I think a lot of the tricks that people pull to get them to fail the Turing test is to essentially get them to almost admit that they're a computer. Like, convince them that they're a computer based on how they're responding. Like, you responded like this, and this is how a computer would respond, and eventually tricking them into saying, oh, yeah, that's true, essentially. I don't know.
The
Yeah.
best tricks I've always found are like it's always context. I try to
Mm,
say things that require lots of context and that really only humans sort of understand because of the way we experience life. and then
Mm-hmm.
they just don't have those experiences, so it's just like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that probably trips up a lot of them.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears to video games.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Uh, you want to talk about Destiny 2?
Sure. I actually have a question for you, video game
Okay.
related, if you want.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of games, and it kind of involves Destiny a little bit. I feel like a lot of games, especially shooter games, are getting heavy into abilities. And like rather than you just being like a person with like a gun or a device, you're a person with like this big superhero power. And like I was thinking of Overwatch the other day. Overwatch has this weird variety of like some of the characters have guns that you shoot, and some of them it's all just like directional and skill based using your abilities. And I I was wanting to get your opinion. Do you think games are focusing too much on having some kind of ability in their like first person shooter? I feel like every big first person shooter nowadays has some kind of like big ability that you have to almost like know exactly
Uh,
when to use it, and like the action of like using your gun is like some becomes like some sub feature in the game.
Now, okay, I don't think it's impossible to do it correctly because this goes back to my favorite game of all time, Firefall, where you had
Okay.
guns, but you also had abilities. Like one of my favorite abilities on there was you send out this orb, you shoot this orb, and it can bounce off of things. But as soon as it comes in contact with either an enemy or an ally, it explodes and it does damage to enemies and it heals your allies. So as a
Okay.
healer class, I just fire this ball out, but I'd have to know how to aim it and time it, see if it was gonna hit my ally before the enemy was there. Like it took a lot of skill and thought, but it was really smooth and it worked really well. It always worked exactly the way I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think no another game that comes to mind, which I feel is probably one of the first games to start doing this, was Smite. Smite was the
Okay. Yeah.
first person MOBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they could never figure out and I think even last year I tried downloading it. I'm like, let's see if they figured it out yet. It's still popular. Like there's a tournament going on right now for Smite.
Yeah. Smite's still a huge game.
But like from my perspective, it just never feels right. The being able to set off abilities from the first person's perspective and getting like the range right and the timing right. They couldn't figure it out. I
Mm-hmm.
remember playing Overwatch a few times and it was closer, but it just felt really there's Overwatch has other problems, which I think maybe soiled
Lots
my
of people
opinion of
know.
it.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, now everyone's clinging on to that idea, right? Like you've got to have these abilities.
Like
I
I
don't
even
know if
think to
it's
like Call of Duty. Call of Duty even is like quote unquote a pure shooter game. But then you have all these like care package abilities that you have
like
to
the
like
little gadgets.
know
Like I'm
and
gonna pull up my
memorize.
scanner and stupid stuff.
It's like they've even gone away from like, I mean it's not like superhero abilities, but it's still like these critical abilities that like if you don't know how to use,
Like the drone.
you're like on a sub skill level that you just can't quite get past.
Yeah.
Like because you talked about talking about Destiny. I will
Uh-huh.
oftentimes just completely forget that I have a super. I'll just completely forget. I'll just be playing with my guns, grenades, and my shield, which are still abilities, but I think they're minor abilities, if you can kind of
yeah.
classify them as that. But I'll forget I have a super until like the last 10% of the boss's health, where I literally super I don't super till the end of the fight, and will just completely forget to utilize that. And I don't know if it's because I'm scared I'm not going to get it back in time for that final fight, which I obviously will if I build myself right, you know?
Right.
But I'll forget, and it frustrates me because I know other people are almost like timing that, and they get to that next skill level of like being able to do these like big bursts of damage. And there's like this other skill level that is required
I
to be able
remember
to use those abilities.
there was like a sort of, at least for me, some sort of like skill or understanding that I went past. We beat that first raid. Partway
Mhm.
through it, I sort of realized, I don't know, remember if everyone else came to the same realization, but like if everyone's using their ults more often, you generate more light, and then you could use it more.
Mhm.
So if we're just always using them, we can always use them because everyone's dropping that light, and you just pick it up, and it just take turns ulting like every single, and it just
Yeah.
works. But if you don't get everyone on that same page of generating light like that, you end up with that sort of scarcity fear of like, I'm not going to be able to charge it back up in time for when I need it next.
Yeah.
But I think that Destiny 2 has solved sort of. I think they've got the right balance, though.
I think they do it the best. Out of everybody, I think
Yeah,
they do it the best, for sure.
I think so. Having it not available all the time, like a game like, Overwatch, where like your abilities are just to refresh really quick,
Mhm.
uh, it sort of just doesn't make them special anymore. It makes them your main, source of damage. Um,
I'm curious as to whether you ever I sometimes wish there was a version of Destiny that just didn't have supers. That was literally just the guns, the fancy jumping, grenades, and maybe your class ability, but just like no supers. Because I feel like the last good first person shooter that didn't have abilities was Counter Strike.
Counter Strike.
I think that's the last
Yeah.
game that was like that. Since then, maybe some of the early Call of Duties, like the original Modern Warfare 2 was maybe the last one that like didn't have like a main focus on abilities. But I feel like every first person shooter since then, there isn't one. I just don't think it exists anymore. And
Interesting.
I'm wondering if the player base has changed to where they prefer that, or we're
Oh,
whether we could possibly get one again in the future that would be really good. Like I
I
almost kind of
think
wish and miss that, if that makes
I
sense.
I think that we've um well, Fortnite is an interesting piece
Oh,
of this
true.
question
I guess they don't have abilities, do they?
because they don't, but they have a lot of weird guns. Not a lot, even just like some. Like they do have like you throw trampolines down to bounce you up. They have some
Mhm.
things that are like items you get that do like accessory
Mhm.
abilities, like the plunger. It's like a grappling hook and things like that. But I feel like those sort of folks, that generation, the Fortnite generation and the Overwatch generation, are growing up to the point now where we've the ones who are going to become developers have become game developers. And
Mhm.
so now they're implementing what they know. And they've never experienced the type of gaming you and I have. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that's partly responsible for the sort of saturation we're getting now, where everything feels that way, where everything there's not just a pure shooter. There's always abilities stacked on top of it and
Yeah.
other.
Or I keep saying abilities and it keeps feeling wrong. An extra skill set, like a
It's
separate skill set you have to get. Because like you mentioned
yeah,
Fortnite, and it's like, yeah, okay, I guess there's not a lot of huge abilities, but there's still that separate skill set of the building or those all those accessory things you were talking about. That
you have to know when to use it, how to use it, where to place it. Oh, why didn't you put it on top of the hill? If you put it on top of the hill, we would have got more air.
yeah,
You know
it's
what I mean?
it like it turns into the skill and the part where you use the gun is like 10% of the game.
Yeah.
And I wish there was a game that was back to like 80% of the game was using your gun.
Yes.
It feels like it's gone away from that.
Yeah.
And I don't hate the current games that do that. I just wish there was another option that did that.
Counter Strike 2, I didn't play it a ton yet, but I jumped in there one day and ran around, and it felt real good.
Hmm.
It felt like it was back to those basics a bit.
Maybe I'll have to try it. See if that scratches the itch that's been hitting me.
Yeah. They still don't do the maps right. I hate this. Oh, I have a whole thing about how maps should be.
Yeah.
That I blame Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch for taking these sort of weird, like sort of arena type maps, them making it so that there are so many routes. Oh, Destiny 2 does it with their PvP, where there's so many routes around the whole map
Mm-hmm.
that like anyone can end up being. There's no clear line of
There's
like
nowhere you
enemy
can hold.
territory.
There's nowhere
Yeah,
you can hold a position.
yeah, they've tried to get rid of that sort of thing. I think because you have people who bitch about campers and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
where camping's a part of the game. There are ways to deal with campers other than just complaining about it. Say, make it so they can't camp anymore, so I can sneak up around behind them. There's flashbangs and grenades, and
There's
there's all
lots of.
sorts of tactics.
Did you ever play Tom Clancy Ghost Recon Phantoms?
Um, is that I remember playing one Tom Clancy game with you. I don't remember which one it was.
It might have been. It might have been this one because I played this one
Okay.
a lot when it was around. The servers have been discontinued. You can't play the game anymore.
Uh,
But in my opinion, that was the last modern multiplayer game that had maps like you're talking about, where there was a clear line of fire and there was not a way. I mean, if they pushed forward enough, there was kind of a way to like get around them and flank them and get them out of position. But for the most part, it was the line of fire is here, and as you're progressing through the map, it's just shifting based on how far people are getting because you're both starting on opposite ends and meeting in the middle.
right.
And the solution was you had your different loadouts, like each you had three different classes. You had like an assault class, an engineering class, and
I
then
think
like
that was the
a
one I
sneaking
played.
sniper class.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And I loved playing the sniper class because I loved sniping, but I also loved counter sniping. And it was my job if my guys were pinned down by a camping sniper to counter snipe him and get him out of the way so my guys could suddenly move forward and trash them. And so instead of like relying on someone like going around the side and just like suddenly being behind them,
Yeah.
I had to skill based get them with while they were doing like some kind of
Yeah.
distraction or something like that. And it was
You,
way fun to be using those tactics. I had the
you
same
had to
complaint
outsnipe
sometimes
them.
with like World of Tanks
Oh yeah.
because they have the artillery. Artillery is essentially the same kind of concept of being able to just like get around them and destroy them. Like as a tank, you could find a position and like settle in and like hold a place, but then all of a sudden artillery could just hit you from anywhere and destroy you while the enemy just like hid. And it was super frustrating. But like that Tom Clancy game was
You
like
got
the
to use like the
last one.
mountains correctly to sort of hide
Yeah.
to get the right angle so they can't get you. Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, my favorite example is in the original Counter Strike, the map Dust, just Dust 1, no Dust 2.
Mm-hmm.
The first Dust map, there was a clear sort of line of fence, but there was two of them because there was two routes you could go.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone could be pushing better on one side and not pushing well on the other side. And so you actually had like two different things. And so like if you went up to one line of defense and like they're holding it real hard, you send a couple people to go down to the second one and they've forgotten to cover it. And you can maybe win that one and then get around them.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think having two, maybe three routes is like the maximum. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but what's happened is they've taken that idea of being able to counter route people and go, okay, there's a dozen different ways you can go, and you never know.
There's
And
like a
it's
gazillion ones. Yeah.
and it's totally taken that mechanic out of first person shooters. That's
Yeah.
the if there's a thing I hate that I miss from first person shooters, it's
Mm-hmm.
that aspect of having that line of fire, the enemy zone.
Yeah. It's almost like they are trying to make the maps to where they can move where you spawn anywhere on the map and have it feel the same. Like you actually see that in Destiny in the PvP and in things like um oh geez.
Yeah. That's the main reason I have a hard time
Yeah.
with the Destiny
Basically like
PvP.
they approach your spawn point and your spawn point just moves.
Yeah,
But
they just try
where
to
you move
spawn
to
you in
doesn't
a
matter.
unoccupied location, and then you gotta be like, you gotta orient yourself like, oh, where am I now? Which way am I facing?
Yeah.
Uh, There's no front or back. It's just
Yeah. Because they used to solve that in some games where you basically had it was basically a long strip of a map where you start your spawn closer towards the middle, and as they progress, if they got too close to
Oh,
your spawn point just moved back to a further back position, and you had to
right.
re-advance and hold your position. And you're trying to like do this kind of
Almost
tug
like
of
a
war
tug of
across the
war.
map until you get all the way to the back, and then you're losing. And sucks to suck if they've pushed you up so far to where you can't spawn and do much. Your team is just not doing well, and you've lost.
Those ones are pretty fun. I've played some of those. Those are
Mhm.
great. Firefall had a PvP that was like that, and it was pretty cool.
It is interesting that almost no first-person shooter keeps that kind of stuff in mind anymore. It's more of just like a.
I
It's
think it's
almost like they're.
because
It's almost like they're catering towards free for all, just anywhere like
the
free for all arena.
death match, and I don't.
Right.
It's hard, and I've tried. I've tried a bunch of these games. I've tried to get into it, but something about it's right. It's that aspect that's just missing that makes it feel a little bit hollow. Maybe we'll make that. Should we make that game?
Should we just decide to make that game and make a better first-person shooter? We could do it
Eventually.
eventually, maybe once AI
Mm,
gets good enough to just write it for us.
probably could. Yeah.
Possibly, possibly.
Well, have you tried any other new games?
Let's see here. I no, I was the only new thing I've been doing gaming wise recently was I was trying out Overwatch again. I was
Oh,
having some
okay.
fun with it, but I was trying it out again because I used to play that a lot early on.
Oh, it's been a long time. And if I remember right, actually, you know what? Another part of Overwatch that I really struggled with was that you could change your character sort of midway through a match. And then
Mm-hmm.
um sometimes it was really obvious what character to choose, but you're the other one that doesn't know like
Oh
what
yeah,
you
like
should
there's
be.
like certain counters for like certain.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
like if you switch to something, then they'll switch to something to counter you and you don't realize you've been countered and that you should actually switch to something else now. Even though it worked, you're like, it was working. No, it's not working. And it's just like part of that whole like being able to counter so immediately with an entirely different character was
Mm-hmm.
really hard for me to wrap my head around. It's
And
like you
it's
have to have such a higher level of knowledge about the game.
I feel like Overwatch doesn't have that as bad. I think I see that worse in other games. I feel like you only see that bad in Overwatch if your team is not coordinated at all.
Mm.
So, like, for instance, there's a character called Ana who can sleep one of the characters. So if they're like in the middle of doing their super, they can shoot a sleeping dart and the character just falls asleep and it cancels their super. And there's certain characters
Okay.
that works really, really well against. But then all it requires is their DPS to start focusing on me so that I can't do that. And then all of a sudden their getting behind me character is countering me, and all I have to do is make sure that I'm pinging that so that my DPS character is watching my back. And so it's like there's a little bit of like this counter following each other to where the counter
Mhm.
doesn't feel as like immediate and like final, where like their character just counters me and there's almost nothing I can do about it.
Oh, okay.
As long as your team is just like somewhat competent and paying attention. But if they're just like tunnel vision, not looking at anything else with the horse blinders, it feels that way for sure. Oh, I did start playing Dragon Quest. That actually is a new game that I have been started
Oh,
playing. It's not a new game, but it's like that
is that the one where you can
JRPG.
build in it also?
No, it's a single player JRPG. Um,
Um,
you
oh, I
can't
remember
build in
playing the
it.
one on NES, so I played it on Nintendo.
Yeah, the Dragon Quest franchise has been around for a long time, but I just recently started playing Dragon Quest 11.
So Dragon Quest Heroes 11?
It's Dragon Quest
I think this
11.
is
Well, let me pull up Steam real quick.
yes, I'm old enough to view this game on Steam, thanks.
And for me, it's just been a really fun.
JRPG action.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's just been a very fun storyline focused game where you kind of have like the
Oh,
turn-based fighting, and so you're like strategizing on like the different abilities of your like four characters that are in the line of combat, and you're taking turns with the enemy, kind of micromanaging your team or letting them just auto do their own thing. And it's been a long time since I've been able to get invested into a storyline of a single player game, you know?
Ooh,
And so
yeah.
it's been fun to like find one that's actually kind of holding my attention. And this game is big. I am 30 hours in, and someone the other day told me I'm maybe like 10 to 15% through the game.
Wait, actually, now I don't know if I'm looking at the right one.
It's called, its full title is, let me go to the store page. Dragon Quest 11S, Echoes of an Exclusive Age, the
Okay, I'm
definitive
looking at
edition.
Dragon Quest Heroes 2.
No.
And the
So this
two,
is just
it's
Dragon
Roman
Quest
numerals 2, so
XI.
it looked like an 11. Okay, hang on.
Dragon Quest XI is, and you'll pretty much find it. Actually, I think I can copy this link and send it to you if you want.
S Echoes, here it is. I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, it
It's
even
kind
has
of
a
got
demo.
a bit of a, it's the art, the people who made the art in this game are the same people who did the art for Dragon Ball Z. And so you've got like this Dragon Ball Z kind of a feel to some of the characters.
Ooh.
And then, like, it has some like throwbacks to like the original ones that you were like playing on your Game Boy and stuff like that you can kind of go back and play in that art style if you want. But it's just been like I just recently fought like a really big boss where I had to like micromanage all of my team members. It was a lot of fun to like to be doing that and kind of be a little more invested in the story.
Oh, wow. Oh, and it does. Okay, so there's parts of it that look very JRPG, like
Yeah, so
top
like
down.
there's like an element of it where one of the bad guys is messing with time in the past.
Oh.
And so you have to go back and fix some of the storylines from the old versions of the game. And so you get to go back and
Up.
do missions from like the original games way back when, and like play in this like old pixel art version of the game with like your characters that you have right now.
That's cool.
It's actually
Oh.
kind of it's really fun. And it's like it doesn't force you to do it. You can actually switch the whole game to just be the pixel art if you want, I think.
Oh. So
Um,
that's why, okay, that's why this page has got like a mix of the two different art styles.
mhm. So you can actually like just
Okay.
play the whole game as that art style if you are just in love with it, or in just like the old missions, you can go back and play those old missions in that art style. Otherwise, it's like a modern kind of 3D anime art, and I I caught it on sale, and it's well worth the $40 it is right now. If you enjoy it, you'll get hours and hours of fun gameplay.
I might try that. That could be fun. I played the last one I played was on Nintendo Switch. And it's shoot, what's
Hmm.
it called? Something Traveler.
Breath of the Wild,
Octopath Traveler.
Octopath Traveler. Okay.
Yeah. And it was like there's like several characters and they all have their own storylines. They go through the same world and you just switch between the characters.
Okay.
And you play their storyline, you can switch to somebody else and it plays through their storyline, but it's all like the same world all happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can like change something for another character's perspective.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Huh.
But I liked that one. It was a JRPG and it's a few
Yeah,
years old.
this is the first JRPG I've actually fully kind of gotten into. I've always kind of known about JRPGs kind of from a distance and experienced them through like other people. If that makes
Hmm.
sense. This is the first one I've
Oh yeah,
dove into myself, and it's been a blast. I've been having a lot of fun with it.
I think I might try that one. What did I try? I picked up a new game
Mm-hmm.
earlier this week. It's City Skylines 2.
Mm.
So like I've played some of the Sim Cities. I played the first City Skylines, which I liked. Um, City Skylines 2 uh is not ready yet, or may never be ready.
Fair.
There's some bugs in it, and as I went through like their forums, like these are bugs that have existed since the game released, and like
Oof,
actually
and they're
been
just not addressing
reported,
them.
and they've just haven't addressed them. Like one of them is a solar farm.
Yeah.
The one solar farm you could buy. So that's the weird things. Like there's not even a variety of the stuff, which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
The one solar farm you can buy, it um it supposedly has like a battery bank on it, and it's supposed to use the battery bank at night when the sun goes down. It just doesn't work.
Oh, great.
So when the sun goes down, your town runs out of power,
Oh,
and
nice.
your battery's
Okay.
just there like at full charge. And you're like, well,
Just
that's
hanging
great.
out.
It's just such a very obvious bug that it's like, what, that they haven't bothered to address yet.
Yeah. Almost feels core mechanic kind of a bug.
Right. And with
It.
the other city skylines, you could create all sorts of different types of towns, like small towns and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just rural and but this one, it's like it's all geared toward just make the biggest city possible. So all the sort of hints, like people are like the needs of the city are all geared to like you just have to make your city bigger. You just
Just
have to have
constantly make it bigger, better, bigger, better, bigger, better, bigger, better.
yeah. Instead, and it totally takes away from the creative aspect of making it how I want it. So instead of making like a rural town and trying to balance out the taxes and economic of the area for a
Mm-hmm.
rural town, it just doesn't work at all. You have to just go full throttle towards trying to make a big city.
So there's almost no state of like needs. There's no way to like actually find the balance of needs met. It just constantly forces you to make things bigger, better to like
Kind
meet
of can.
needs.
I found a way. It's tricky, but like all the indicators, like there's indicators on there that says you need this, you need this.
Mm-hmm.
But you ignore those and just do what you want. There is still another way of becoming net, like you're net positive with the economy and everything, and like getting
Mm-hmm.
the like you get it to work, but people are still going to bitch about complaining about things that they need when they really don't need it. And like the happy
Yeah.
meter's all the way full and everything, but they're just, we need this, we just need more high
Just
raises.
more,
Yeah.
more. Give me, give me, give me. I need.
So that's the most obnoxious part.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not a sufficient sequel. Like just play City Skylines 1 because it had more stuff on it and it was
Is
just better.
2 the one that came out last year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I've seen a lot of people do mods for City Skyline 1 is what I've seen.
Oh,
Like
okay.
there being like a bunch of mods. And this one keeps coming to mind every time I hear you talk about this game. There's one mod where they've essentially um created a save state of like a city that's along like a coast. Okay. And so like and far out in the coast there's a massive tsunami wave. And so what you do is you have like and it has like a mini town already there, and you can expand your town. But the fun part is you install these other mods that allow you to do the terraforming
Okay.
without like running out of money. And the whole point is to try to create an infrastructure of like drainage and like pumps and like walls of like dirt to try to stop the tsunami from destroying your little town. And
Ooh.
I always thought it was really cool how Skylines had like a lot of mods that were like that created these fun little scenarios to like
There
do
is a setting
do stuff like that.
for natural disasters. I haven't turned it on yet. Maybe that would make it more interesting
Okay, so
to
maybe this
spin
was
in
more
there.
of like a save state of a natural disaster that this guy just like set up and it was a scenario maybe it wasn't like a
Yeah.
full mod, but
Yeah, maybe.
it's I always thought that was cool how a lot of the content I saw just from like YouTubers and stuff like that was having these fun little scenarios that because they had gotten to the point where they were good enough to like build like a working city, but they were having fun working on like these essential challenge scenarios, so to speak, which was
That
I
could
think
make it
is
interesting. Yeah,
which I
that
think is
adds a
cool
twist
when a
to it.
game has the ability to do that, you know.
Yeah. Add some extra challenge in there if you start getting bored.
Yeah.
All right. Any last topics? I think we hit an hour. We've done it.
We did a thing. No, just that I need to continue refining my stupid green screen setup. I just looked over and I feel like I look all fuzzy, like out of focus.
It's kind of cuddly. uh
Hopefully that'll get better.
yeah,
But no other
we'll figure
topics.
it out. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Because people don't tune in anymore. Tuning isn't a thing anymore. You don't have to tune a radio or dial. Thanks for surfing to us. Thanks for surfing in. You
Yeah.
surf the right? Is
Yeah,
that the
you can
new
surf
thing?
in. Maybe.
Thanks for surfing in.
It's now is. We're going to start the
Bye.
trend of surfing in.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.